Namaste, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. This is David Frawley contacting you from the Rocky Mountains of the United States on the other side of the world. I'm very happy to be with you for this 33rd All Orissa Conference on Sri Aurobindo, also his 150th anniversary, 75th anniversary of India's independence, and happy to join you for this talk on yoga and Ayurveda. And the subject, of course, is part of this whole idea of transformation in Sri Aurobindo's yoga, which is unique among the yogas of the world. Sri Aurobindo teaches that life is an evolution in consciousness, that all life is yoga, and that yoga is the purpose of human life, which is to raise our consciousness. At the same time, as we know, our human consciousness is not highly spiritually evolved. We have a long history of conflict, wars, destruction, coming up to the present day. We have made great progress in terms of outer science and technology, particularly over the recent decades. Yet at the same time, all of our inner passions and ignorance, you might say, outer view of life remain. There are individuals who have a deeper vision. There are groups, gurus, ashrams. Even India as a whole has a greater sense of that inner tradition of yogic knowledge. So if we look forward to the evolution of humanity, it will require a change of consciousness, but perhaps even evolutionary changes in the brain, and also evolutionary changes in the body and in our heritage as a species, in our DNA per se, and essentially a new humanity overall. And this is what Sri Aurobindo has long envisioned and tried to bring to us the possibility in order to manifest. And that is what I want to talk to you about today, historically, and from the perspective of Ayurveda and yoga, and some of the, you might say, insights and prime practices, ideas, or orientations in that particular direction. So there are many healing traditions in India, but mainly rooted in Ayurveda. Of course, these have as their orientation the treatment of disease overall, and also promoting the longevity, immunity, well-being, and also not just the physical basis of medicine, but also the psychological and spiritual basis of medicine. If we are not psychologically well, emotionally well, physically, we are also going to become imbalanced. And this is what we see throughout the world today, where issues and diseases like depression, anxiety, attention problems, educational problems, drug addictions are rising overall. So Ayurveda's view is that if we live in harmony with nature and also live in harmony with our own inner nature, then we can have a long life of 100 years, and we can have a good sadhana, spiritual practice, and we can avoid all the afflictions of the mind and most of those of the body overall, except some of those owing to time itself, the aging process. In other words, Ayurveda recognizes that death is inherent in life, and that life is a guest or a short process of an embodied being based upon the balance and the interchange of the 5 elements and various organs, tissues, structures that have been developed for that purpose, but which cannot remain because of the long-term entropy of physical matter to decompose back into its constituents. In that regard, Ayurveda postulates the three biological humors or doshas: Vata dosha, dominated by the air and ether elements; Pitta dosha, dominated by fire, with a certain oily aspect as well; Kapha dosha, dominated by water, earth, and diseases are of these three types, and constitutions are of these types. Vata dosha, connected to prana, is the prime force of life, but it is also the prime force of disease, as there is a certain inherent tendency for the life force to leave the body and go back to its origin. Life itself never dies. Prana in that self never dies. It moves on to another birth or another body, but itself continues, reincarnating in a new body, a new mind, carrying on certain karmas, but not carrying on the vestiges, or at least the primary factors of the previous physical body. Pitta, as the factor of Agni, is able to bring warmth, light, digestion, purification, intelligence overall. Kapha gives the basic structure of the body, and also powers of endurance, feeling, and motivation overall. Balance of the doshas brings about health. Imbalance causes disease. And individual constitution types are of these three doshic types and their variations. And of course, Ayurveda has treatment at the level of diet, herbs, massage, panchakarma, traditionally extending even to surgery and the use of certain drugs or chemical medicines besides the herbs. This remains the main scope of Ayurveda today. Now, Ayurveda also recognizes subtle forces of positive health, and these are manifestations or inner aspects of Vata dosha, Pitta dosha, Kapha dosha, and they're called prana, tejas, and ojas. Prana as the primary positive life force that gives health, rejuvenation, revitalization, subtle energy, and deeper motivation and capacity to transcend. Tejas as the inner power of Agni that gives a deeper force of fire, intelligence, perception, warmth, compassion, insight, endurance. And Ojas, the ultimate foundation of health and well-being at a subtle level, the factor of endurance, support, ability to withstand, the prime basis of immunity. So in Ayurveda, we also work to develop these higher forces of prana, tejas, and ojas, as at the same time, we work to reduce the excesses of Vata dosha, Pitta dosha, and Kapha dosha overall. And these then become the basis of yoga practice. And yoga sadhana, we aim to increase prana, tejas, ojas, higher forms of prana, agni, and powers of immunity and strength, inner character, inner power, inner insight, and the capacity not only towards healing and longevity, also rejuvenation of the body, and also rejuvenation of the nervous system, and also rejuvenation of the mind. And under this idea of rejuvenation, there is also the similar concept of raising and transforming the human being, building a better quality of human being with greater intelligence, greater vitality, and greater longevity. And this is also what yoga practicing seeks to bring about. And here we begin to move more towards the transformation of the physical. A higher physical being would have more prana, tejas, and ojas, and less vata dosha, pitta dosha, kapha dosha. Although these in themselves will not give transformation or self-realization, they do aid in the process. Yoga always aims at creating more prana and more ojas and higher form of Agni, but an inner prana that is connected to the cosmic life force, an inner Agni that is connected to the perceptual powers of our higher self, the Atma or Purusha, and ojas, greater powers of resistance to emotional, mental, and also physical dualities and disturbances. This then takes us to the third level of these three forces, which are the realms of Vayu, Agni, and Soma, not simply at individual levels, but also at cosmic levels. Vayu being the immortal cosmic life force, and Kriya Shakti, which is also the power of transformation. Agni being the innate, inherent flame of consciousness, which is the power of life, light, purification, transformation. And Soma here has not only the power of rejuvenation, but the power of Ananda, immortality, and you might say transformation at a subtle level. Vayu is basically Sat, Agni is Chidagni, Soma is also Ananda. So Ayurveda then takes us into the purification and rejuvenation rasayana and special herbs to rejuvenate the mind, the nervous system. And these also aid in meditation and deeper spiritual practices and study. And this then takes us more into the direction of yoga, yoga in Vedic, Vedantic, and also in Tantric senses. And in this regard, yoga aims at the development and awakening of the subtle body, or the Sukshma Sharira, made up of subtle elements and tanmatras, the chakra system, the kundalini energy, and also having an inner power of transformation. If we wish to transform the physical body, we also need to awaken the subtle body within it, which is the source of these subtle forces of healing and revitalization. These, of course, begin with the subtle prana, which is the unitary prana of immortality, we might say, connected to the prana Purusha. And there is also the Agni at a subtle level, which also allows us to digest our experiences and emotions. And the Soma, or the Ananda, or the rejuvenating force of the subtle body overall. Now, if we look at the tantric system, we actually divide the body and the subtle body specifically into these three different areas or dimensions. The three lower chakras, specifically the Muladhara, as the basis of Agni, and the Kundalini Shakti, which is the inner Agni force or Pranagni that holds these higher powers of awakening the subtle body and using it to help awaken, enliven, and transform the mind, the consciousness, and to some extent, the physical body. And then the next three chakras, the first three from the Muladhara to the Manipura, or from the root chakra to the navel. And then the next three from the navel chakra to the throat chakra, and specifically the region of the heart or the Hridaya, Anahata chakra specifically, which is the realm of Surya, but also to some extent prana, and the sun also as the source of prana, and the inner sun, the Atman, as the source of prana and of all revitalizing energies overall, and connecting to the inner self in the spiritual heart. And then the three higher chakras, throat, Agnya, third eye, and Sahasrara, the 1,000-petal lotus of the head. This is said to be the region of Soma, and specifically the Sahasrar is said to be the region of Soma, which also means the moon, the nectar, and again, the power of immortality and deathlessness. So essentially, to awaken the subtle body, the Kundalini Agni arises, and the Soma Amrit descends. And here we discover the capacity of drawing that immortal Soma into the physical body and using it to aid in rejuvenation, longevity. But perhaps we could also say, in the higher rejuvenation of consciousness, changes in the brain, which is connected to the Sahasrar, and the development of a higher intelligence within us, we can connect these indirectly to Sri Aurobindo's idea of the supramental body and the supramental human being. Now, in the tantric system, many techniques have been devised to bring about these changes in the body, physical and subtle mind consciousness, and to create immortality. Some yogis seek immortality in the subtle body by learning to dwell there as their primary nature. Other yogis seek to draw physical immortality into the physical body, or the powers of immortality into the physical body. We have stories of immortal yogis and chiranjivas who have done this in some way, a power of devotion, a power of yoga, a boon of the devatas, and so forth. The difference is that Sri Aurobindo looks to this according to the descent of a new or higher Shakti, not simply the working with the forces of the subtle body, but a higher Vijnana connected to Vijnana Maya Kosha, which mediates in the traditional system between the subtle and the causal body, but which Aurobindo takes to a higher level of intelligence and awareness. But we do see some connections here. If we bring about a descent of Shakti, the higher Shakti, we also have to have the vehicle, the body and the mind, the physical and the subtle bodies prepared properly to hold this descent of Shakti, which is sometimes said to be like a waterfall, or other times said to be like a descent of lightning. Shakti is identified with Vidyut or Tadit, which is lightning. It's then also connected to a flow of grace or the cosmic waters, like the descent of Ma Ganga onto the head of Shiva, Mahadev. So in other words, Sri Aurobindo is recognizing what these yogis have done, but he's also then looking for a higher way to bring that energy down, which is in many ways more formless or direct, but it must also then look into the energies of the physical and the subtle bodies, how to work with them and how to transform them. Now, many of us know of the role of Soma in the Vedas, and even in the Rudram, speaking of the Agni Somatmakam Jagat, the universe made of Agni and Soma. But these are higher Agnis and Somas. They encompass all the other forms as well. So a deeper Agni, we could say there could be a deeper Agni of this supramental transformation, and a deeper Soma, a greater Soma of the supramental descent. And yet, Sri Aurobindo primarily identifies the supramental with the sun, or Surya. But even in the yogic thought, the sun, or Surya, is sometimes said to be the unification of Agni and Soma, although Surya is more commonly connected with the Agni. We note the importance of Sri Aurobindo's study of Rigveda, in which he did the hymns to the mystic fire, or Agni. I have heard that he also did some study of the Soma hymns. I haven't seen so many of those in translation, but I have heard that some of these, of course, still exist or may not have been released to the public. So in other words, this inner transformation must bring out deeper secrets and a deeper level of Agni, Surya, Soma, or we might say even Agni, Prana, and Soma. So we see how these forces evolve: Vata, Pitta, Kapha, as Prana, Tejas, Ojas, as Vayu, Agni, Soma, and then the higher Surya, Prana, and Agni, Soma. So this must also be there in this transformation, in a deeper learning or understanding about these subtle forces. Now, Agni, Vayu, Soma sounds rather naturalistic or technical, but these are also connected to devatas. In fact, we have the connection of Shiva and Soma. We have also even a connection of Vishnu and Surya, but all these devatas cross over, and also Devis and Shaktis. For example, Tripura Sundari in the Sri Vidya represents the Sahasrar, or the 1,000-petal lotus of the head, and it's Soma, or Ananda force. I remember when I first stayed in Pondicherry, near one of the Sri Aurobindo houses, actually close to the water, I had the ocean. I had a vision of the mother as Tripura Sundari, but I would recognize that that would be this Sri Aurobindo, or a supramental form of Soma, or descent, or Soma Surya. And that is also what we find in the Sri Vidya. Sri Vidya is also the Sahasrar, and it also relates to, of course, the awakening of the Ananda. And it is the Ananda that is necessary to bring about the highest transformation and immortality. Ananda is Amrit, which is the immortal, but it also needs the proper Agni, which is the power to digest and purify and transform that, in the proper Surya, or vaster, deeper intelligence, aspiration, and the proper Prana, the higher Prana, the Prana Purusha, or even the Prana Surya. So there is a strong Vedic connection here, even in these Ayurvedic and Tantric forms. But we are left with a dilemma, as it were. All yogic teachings say that we must understand and teach the individual. Each individual is different relative to doshas, gunas, karmas, and requires a different sadhana. And any higher consciousness must manifest and develop at an individual level, which means it cannot simply follow an en masse movement, a set of formulas or techniques, a magic formula, a magic pranayama, one particular technique for all. There must be an inner attunement or inner discovery according to the nature of that individual or jivatman involved. So this whole issue of how to bring out that transformation is highly individualistic. It manifests over time. How it changes the nervous system, the brain, we really don't know. How it interfaces with technology, we don't know. Although we could say that technology may give us some benefits, but it may also give us major challenges, because technological energies are artificial and they tend to cause entropy, or they tend to cause devitalization, or even disease, or even disturbing the mind. Of course, we have to work with this, working with computer energy right now, but we need to balance that off with meditation, pranayama, pratyahara in nature, major rasayanas like Brahmi or Brahmi ghee. We are building a higher nature, not just simply a higher technology. So our current period in history has certain opportunities relative to something like Sri Aurobindo's yoga, but it also has certain dangers going on. We have the danger of the kind of Brave New World scenario, whether it's test tube babies, whether it's the drug soma that was thought up, not the yogic soma, and the challenges of a declining biosphere and a declining physical and psychological immunity in the individual and also in the collective human beings, the nations, global epidemics. But these very challenges may push us or may create a few individuals who have the ability to adapt, to transform, or to bring in some of these higher forces of Agni, Soma, Prana to face the challenges and to bring in a deeper energy. Now, in that regard, it's very important that in yoga and even Sri Aurobindo's yoga, that Ayurveda is incorporated and used at the level of physical health, psychological health, understanding yogic energies. Ayur doesn't just simply mean life, it means longevity, and it actually means immortality. So there is hidden in the Vedas this pursuit of immortality, and one could say that it could also extend not only into the subtle body, but perhaps eventually into the physical body. And there's also the idea of great rishis who were great yogis, who also lived for thousands of years and may still be alive today, although they may do so in circumstances removed from the contaminations of our society and biosphere today, or they may move back and forth between physical, subtle, causal, transcendent realities, manifesting physical bodies temporarily as needed, but then withdrawing back into the subtle body for rejuvenation. We have Babajis like Yoganandas that speak of immortality. I'm not saying all these processes are the same or they all are done in harmony or following the same pattern, but they're part of a similar aspiration. At the same time, we are born in physical bodies. that are wedded to the energy of death. The mortality is rooted in the cells. The mortality is rooted in the doshas and the tissues. There is a biological clock that is going on through the prana, which is also measuring our lives. We're said to have 10,800 breaths by day and by night, enough breaths for 100 years, or perhaps 120 years. But in yogic secrets, to have greater life and longevity, one needs to slow down or stop the breath, Kevala Kumbhaka, Kechari Mudra, and so forth. Sri Aurobindo did not mention these or make them primary. He thought there was, again, a deeper Shakti and a deeper flow of the mother's grace. Mother here is also Soma, Uma, and mother here is also the divine Shakti, Mother Nature, and the ability then to bring about these subtle transformations. So at this point in time, we can only speculate. We can only do the practices and uphold the teachings that help us move in this direction, whether it is yoga, Ayurveda, Vedanta, specifically Sri Aurobindo's yoga, and learning to unfold the deeper forces of immortality inherent in the divine and inherent in our divine nature, the deeper or more powerful somas, the deeper, more powerful prana, chidagni, ananda soma, sat as also the power of eternal being. So much can be done. We are still only at the beginning phase, scratching the surface, as it were, drawing in correlations and connections. Perhaps even connections can be made to the modern medicine, but the modern medicine is more chemical in nature. And these subtle yogic energies, these agnis and somas, these transformative forces, cannot be reduced to a chemical formula or made into a chemical drug, though they do have correlations with certain herbs or more specifically medhya rasayanas in Ayurveda. So I've tried to introduce you to this idea of yoga and Ayurveda relative to Sri Aurobindo's yoga of transformation. I've only been able to introduce things. I'm only exploring these myself. There are many secrets in the Vedas. There are many secrets in Savitri, and there are many secrets yet to be discovered inside ourselves as we surrender to this divine Shakti within, as we contact our inner Agni and Soma and Surya, and as we contact the divine gurus within us. How long will these changes take? It takes thousands of years, if not millions of years, for evolution's change in species. Yet there can be moments and times of sudden transformation, a new species arising, a new type of individual embodied, a new way of life or consciousness. So this can happen at group, a small group or individual levels, and gradually move into the mass of humanity. Sri Aurobindo and Life Divine had brought out several of these options or possibilities that can occur. So let us look to that inspiration within us and discover what is our path for self-realization, but also for raising humanity, raising our species, raising our planet, and bringing this immortal divine consciousness into the earth realm, even into the body. There are many problems, resistances along the way, but we do need to recognize our responsibility to Mother Nature and the earth, as well as to our own individual realization. At the same time, we contain the entire universe within us, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. I am Atma Brahma. So I hope these insights are helpful to you and help awaken or stimulate your own yoga towards new somas, new transformations, and a new seeking of immortality for the good of all, and recognizing this immortal Sat Chit Ananda that is the ground of existence, and this Ananda that has all the powers of creation and immortality. Creation arises through the Ananda force. So let us join in this great adventure of consciousness and yoga of transformation. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Hari Om Tat Sat. Again, I thank this Orissa congregation and meeting of Sri Aurobindo's yoga, and wish it all the best. May all the powers of light, awareness, Agni, Soma, Surya, and the supramental energy come to all. Namaste, Hari Om.
Good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon, and I want to thank Dr. Kanungo for inviting me. I feel very much appreciative of this opportunity. I'm going to use some slides to illustrate elements of my talk, and let me begin bringing those up right now. An introduction to evolutionary parenting. I expect that I don't have any need to give you additional introduction to Sri Aurobindo, his amazing contributions, his depth of contribution to our understanding of ourselves, our potentials, of the reality that we live in. In the West, though, Sri Aurobindo is not as well known as he is in India. So his contribution in describing human nature, human unfoldment in the first 21 years of life, human potential for evolution of consciousness is also less well known. What I was led to discover some years ago was that there were two other spiritual teachers who were contemporaries of Sri Aurobindo who articulated very much the same description of human potential, of human nature, of human unfoldment in the first 21 years of life, of the needs for parenting and education to maximize the potential for this unfoldment. And one of these was Rudolf Steiner, who is perhaps best well known today as the founder of the Waldorf schools, although Steiner had many, many more areas in which he contributed. And the other is Hazrat Inayat Khan, a man born in India, raised in India, who came to the United States in 1909, sent by his Sufi master, and who brought Sufism to the West for the first time in the 18 years that he lived subsequent to 1909. So all three of these enlightened spiritual masters, between the years of 1910 and 1920, described the same essential description of human nature, human potential, human unfoldment. So in my writing, I call this the common vision, and it has several key attributes. The first one is the integral nature of human beings. And I'm sure that this is quite familiar to those of you who are students and devotees of Sri Aurobindo. The interpenetrated, interrelated qualities of these different beings and the way that they can manifest and unfold at different stages and different ages in the first 21 years of life, and the need to pay attention to the integrality of these various beings and their relationships with each other. The generative process available to us, the guidance of the psychic being for unfoldment, or in the West, I speak of this, of course, as the will. As the soul. The soul, the psychic being, expressed through the will, the inner teacher. Unfoldment, emergence, autopoiesis. The description of the three eras of unfoldment, each with its own potential, each with its own capacities, each with its own challenges, each with its own consciousness. This is an incredibly important map for understanding and making sense of the potentials for unfoldment of children and youth in the first 21 years of life. So the evolutionary insight from the common vision, the inner teacher, that the inner teacher, when it leads, the individual can unfold into integral consciousness around the age of 21. And then finally, that the evolution of consciousness that humanity needs today can be manifested to the extent that parents and educators understand this common vision, what it offers, what it requires, what it challenges. So in this book, The Common Vision, Parenting and Educating for Wholeness, I describe all of this in much more detail. And at the end of the talk, I will note for you ways in which you can obtain this book. I'd be happy to send it to you as a PDF without any charge. The Common Vision then gives us insights for evolutionary parenting. So this is the second concept that I want to share with you in this talk. There are 5 insights. The first one is the existence of the soul. And again, this is not news to any of you who are students and devotees of Sri Aurobindo. The second is that the will of the child is the expression of the inner teacher, of the psychic being. And this, of course, is the greatest challenge for parents, to honor the will as much as possible, to provide environments in which the will has freedom, recognizing that the parents also absolutely need to provide safety, and that the child in various ages, not to mention the youth, is not always capable of articulating or delineating what safety means. So it's this constant dance between providing freedom and providing safety. And the great thing about this is that it's inevitable that parents will get this wrong at times, but it's not about perfection. Parenting is never about perfection. It's about recognizing as much as possible that the will is the expression of the psychic being, the inner teacher, and as much as possible, giving the will freedom to express itself. The will knows, the inner teacher knows what the child and youth needs at any particular moment. So the third insight is that for parents to do this, they need to grow emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. The fourth insight is that there's a lot of information available now because of the teachings of Sri Aurobindo, Hazrat Inayat Khan, and Rudolf Steiner about the unfoldment potentials of human beings at every age and stage. And there's also information that comes, of course, from developmental psychology. And then finally, the fifth insight is that parenting can make a significant contribution to the evolution of human consciousness, and that this is what we need to amplify on our planet right now, given that we have created for ourselves an evolutionary crisis in climate change. So evolutionary parenting is something that I develop and explore in this book, which I will also make available to you And in this book, in addition to laying out the concepts, there are interviews with parents who parented in significant accord with evolutionary parenting, and interviews with their late adolescents and early adult children. So it's the parents saying, this is what we did, this is what worked, this is what failed, this is how we struggled, this is what we did about education. And then the child slash adolescent slash young adult saying, this is how I experienced it. This is how I am now at 18 or 22 or 23. So the last piece that I want to share with you today is about developmental psychology and what's going on with that right now that connects with evolutionary parenting and with the unfoldment of consciousness. So Piaget began in the 1930s, basically inventing developmental psychology, inventing this notion of stages, inventing the notion that at each stage, consciousness, of course, he was looking at cognition, was radically different than at the other stages. And of course, now there has been developmental psychology for at least 60 or 70 years in different parts of the world, with various psychologists working with Piaget, contradicting Piaget at times, adding to Piaget, and so on and so forth. In the last 60 years, there's been the development of adult developmental psychology. But before that, a Swiss mystic, cultural historian named Jean Gebser articulated a hierarchy and developmental structure of consciousness in human beings throughout our existence, the 300,000 years of our existence as a species. And Gebser, part mystic, part cultural historian, looked at the historical record and found these different stages of consciousness: archaic, magical, mythical, mental, and integral. He probably got the word integral from Sri Aurobindo. If not, wouldn't be surprising. So Claire Graves is one of the first developmental psychologists who went out in the world, interviewed thousands and thousands of people in many different cultures, and came up with essentially the same structure, except he added a stage between modernist and integral, which was called postmodern. So to give you a little bit of insight, if you're not familiar with this, into what this manifests. So in the United States today, we have about 30% of the population of adults who are centered in traditional consciousness. This is fundamentalism, and mostly they're Christians, but not entirely. We have about 40% of the population centered in modernist consciousness. This is the primacy of reason and manifested as democracy, capitalism, science, and technology. We have about 30% of the population, mostly younger than 40, who are centered in postmodern. And postmodern is focused more on fairness, on justice, on equity, on respect for diversity, on ecology, on whole systems, and so on and so forth. And I imagine that you can recognize these three different consciousness stages in India as well. Jenny Wade, about 25 years ago, looked at all of the work in adult development psychology and came up with very similar stages, although she gave them a little bit different names. The good news is that the stage beyond postmodern is integral consciousness. So all of the previous stages are absolutist in their truth claims. All the previous stages claim that my reality is right, or true, or correct, or good, and that everybody else at every other stage is wrong, or foolish, or crazy. From integral consciousness, we first see the evolutionary process, and we see that every stage, as it emerged in the evolution of the species, was a progressive movement, and that every stage over time became increasingly regressive. And for example, you can see that with modernism really clearly. But integral consciousness opens up the potential for working with and engaging people at previous stages without judging them, because you can see their humanity, you can feel their humanity. To look at this in Sri Aurobindo's model, it's not exactly the same, but essentially, integral consciousness is liberated intelligence amplified by intuitive. It's not necessarily illumined, although it can be beginning to be illumined. But it's in this territory here. And this territory, if we were to have millions or tens of millions of humans centered in this territory, would of course be an enormously progressive movement for our species. So evolutionary parenting creates the potential for youth to achieve stable access to integral consciousness before or by the age of 21. This is the evolutionary leap that our species absolutely needs to accomplish right now. And finally, Sri Aurobindo, Hazrat Inayat Khan, and Rudolf Steiner have given us the map, for how to raise and educate our children and youth to nurture this evolution of consciousness. So I know that you have also a little bit of writing from me for this book, which is more of a pamphlet. And all that I'll say about this, I will also make this available to you if you'd like to have it, is that adolescence is a stage in human unfoldment that is 100 years old at most, given the fact that our species has been around for 300,000 years. It's come upon us in the blink of an eye, and we have yet to fully understand its potentials for the evolution of consciousness. And that's what this booklet is about. So finally, here are my two books. As I said, I'd be happy to share them with you in a PDF. All you need to do is send me an email at the address above, and I'll be delighted to send them to you. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And let's see, I'm going to appear again here in person. There I am. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And I hope that this talk has been of value to you, has offered some creative potential. And I do hope to hear from you as far as these various publications, because it is my joy and gift to be able to share them with the world today. Thank you very much.